About 30 seconds on this.
No.
You're streaming.
Thank you. Before this public meeting begins, I'd like to advise the public of the following. This is a meeting to host public meetings on matters requiring approval under the Planning Act. During the meeting, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers from committee and the public. Before we begin, members of the public are advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submission at the public meeting or make written submission to the Corporation of the Municipality of Central Elgin before the decision, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Central Elgin to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. Further, if a person or public body does not make oral submission at the public meeting or make written submission to the Corporation of the Municipality of Central Elgin before the decision, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Those wanting to be notified of Council's decision on any application should email Diane Wilson at bwilson@centralelgin.org, indicating which meeting they wish to be notified on and providing their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. And we'll now call this meeting to order. This is a public hearing as required by the Planning Act to hear the applicant Rona Wilson and every other person who desires to be heard in favor of or against the application for a minor variance from the zoning bylaw respecting 5999 Fairview Road. Does any member of the committee have a disclosure of interest concerning this application? And I'm seeing none. If the applicant or agent is listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. We will acknowledge your raised hand and you will be unmuted to explain your application. Is the applicant online to speak to the application?
You'll have to admit Seguin Contracting and then make me the host, and then I can run the room as well.
Sanguine Contracting. It's right at the bottom of your there.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I got you now. Thank you.
I take it that you will be speaking on behalf of the applicants?
Yes, I will.
Okay, and if you could please explain the reasoning for the application, please.
The reason for the application is she's looking to actually replace exactly what she has there for a garage on the same footprint. But in the past, I guess it was put there not being authorized or permitted. So it's kind of sat there for the last 30 years and she just like to replace what's there, which is about 1 meter away from the fence or the lot line.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Wilson, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public of the hearing?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject property on Friday, May the 7th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff on that day and published to the municipal website. Notice was also displayed in the weekly C-Buzz advertisements.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, do you have any comments on the application?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further.
Thank you. Are there any comments from municipal staff with regards to the application? I'm seeing none. Mrs. Wilson, have you received any written submissions on this application?
Madam Chair, no correspondence has been received.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions with regards to the application? Councillor Fair, go ahead.
I just had one. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding this, but when it says in requested variance, it says 3.28 feet from the northerly side of the line. And then farther down, it says 1 meter from the southerly side. That implies that the building goes right across the whole property, which it doesn't. Am I missing something there?
Mr. McClure?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe it's just the northerly lot line in the sense that they want to have it the 1 meter. I believe the report recommended that 1.21 meters, and that's having to deal with fire code issues that were raised. So that's what the report is requesting for the northerly 1.2 meters from the northerly.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Does that satisfy your question, Councillor Fair?
Yep, it's clear enough, I guess.
Mr. Perrin, do we have any members of the public online to ask any questions?
Madam Chair, there are members of the public, but I do not see any raised hands.
Thank you. Just in case, give the public a chance. If you are listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you've called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. And your questions will be taken in sequential order. Last call for any questions from the public. And I would say we have none. Everybody has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. Is the committee ready to make a decision? Mrs. Wilson, can you please take the vote?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Kravitz?
Yes.
Councillor Fair?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councillor Rowe?
Yes.
Mayor Martin?
Yes.
And Councillor Wynne?
Yes.
Granted.
Thank you. That application has been granted. Those wanting to be notified of the committee's decision on any application should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralelgin.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and provide their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860 extension 286 and provide the same information. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. We'll call this next meeting to order. This is a public hearing as required by the Planning Act to hear the applicant Tyler Rowe and Christine Vivaxica. My apologies if I got that wrong, and every other person who desires to be heard in favor of or against the application for a minor variance from the zoning bylaw respecting 6109 Stone Church Road. Do any members of the committee have a disclosure of interest concerning this application? I'm seeing none. If the applicant or agent is listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. We will acknowledge your raised hand and you will be unmuted to explain the application. Mr. Perrin, I see Mr. Rowe has his hand raised. Mr. Rowe, you can go ahead to explain your application.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm building a new garage and it's zoned OS2. So that means it requires a minimum setback of 4.5 meters from the property lines, so 15 feet. And I want to build 4 feet from the south property lines.
Is there just a reasoning for wanting to build in the other location?
Oh, yes, because I want the more south, then I could see my backyard. If I comes 15 feet out, I won't be able to see.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's the spot for it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Mrs. Wilson, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public of the hearing?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject property on Friday, May the 7th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff on that day and published to the municipal website. Notice was also displayed in the weekly CBuzz advertisements.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, do you have any questions or comments with regards to the application?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Are there any comments from municipal staff? I'm seeing none. Mrs. Wilson, have you received any written submissions on the application?
Madam Chair, no correspondence has been received.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions with regards to the application? I'm seeing none. Mr. Perrin, do we have anybody in the waiting room that has any questions? I don't see any raised hands. If there is anybody from the public who are watching or listening right now, if you please click the raise hand icon, or if you've called in on a telephone, dial *9, and questions will be taken in sequential order. Last call for comments from the public. Seeing none. Everybody has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. Is the committee ready to make a decision? Yes, and Mrs. Wilson, if you could please take the vote.
Councillor Cravitz?
Yes.
Councillor Fair?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councillor Rowe?
Yes.
Mayor Martin?
Yes.
And Councillor Wynne?
Yes,
Granted.
thank you. Those wanting to be notified of the committee's decision on any application should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralalgon.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and provide their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This meeting is now adjourned. Our next meeting will start at 6:15. We'll call this meeting to order. This is a public hearing as required by the Planning Act to hear the applicant Andy and Katie Hurst and every other person who desires to be heard in favor of or against the application for a minor variance from the zoning bylaw respecting 23 Blossom Ridge. Do any members of the committee have a disclosure of interest concerning this application? I'm seeing none. If the applicant or agent is listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. We will acknowledge your raised hand and you will be unmuted to explain the application. Mr. Perrin, do we have the Hearst or their agent online, do you know? Oh. Kate, would you like to go ahead and explain the application?
Yeah, so we're looking to build a pool in our backyard.
Andy?
Yep.
Go ahead.
We're looking to build a pool in our backyard. Currently, the layout in our backyard with the septic contingency plan that covers our backyard covers most of the area of our backyard. So we would like to encroach into that area by, I think I had 3 meters to allow us to build the pool where we would like.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Wilson, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public of this hearing?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject property on Friday, May the 7th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff on that day and published to the municipal website. Notice was also displayed in the weekly CBuzz advertisements.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, do you have any comments with regards to this application?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further than what was in the report.
Thank you. Are there any comments from municipal staff with regards to the application? I'm seeing none. Mrs. Wilson, have you received any written submissions on the application?
Madam Chair, no correspondence has been received.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions with regards to the application? Mr. Fair, Councillor Fair, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was just curious. It's one that goes, a pool that goes in the ground, or I couldn't understand if it was in the ground or not. And if it's in the ground, it's not interfering with pipes. It's only in the disbursement area. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
It is an in-ground.
Okay, but it does not interfere with piping. It's only in the disbursement area.
Yes, the area is actually the contingency area. So it's not actually in the active field bed area.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Perrin, did you have something further to add?
Yeah, so just to clarify for Councillor Fair, when this development was approved, it was approved on partial servicing. So it has municipal water and private septic systems. In order to ensure that the private on-site septic systems can handle the sewage for indefinite period of time. The municipality zoned what we refer to as a contingency area. So in the event that the existing septic bed fails, there's portion on the lot where a new septic bed could be installed, given that this subdivision is not close to any municipal sanitary services. So it has to all be dealt with on the property. So that's why there is a specified and zoned contingency area on each one of these lots in this subdivision.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
the
Mr. Fair.
clarification.
Is there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none. This meeting will now be open to questions from the public. If you are listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. Questions will be taken in a sequential order. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the record. Mr. Perrin, I guess we don't have anybody with their hands raised.
Seeing none, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Everybody's been given a fair opportunity to be heard. Is the committee ready to make a decision? Mrs. Wilson, if you could please take the vote.
Certainly. Counselor Cravitz,
Yes.
Counselor Fair,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Marks,
Yes.
Counselor Rowe,
Yes.
Mayor Martin,
Yes.
and Counselor Wynn.
Yes.
It's granted.
Thank you. Those wanting to be notified of the committee's decision on any application should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralalgon.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and provide their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This meeting is now adjourned, and our next meeting will commence at 6:30. will now call this meeting to order. This is a public hearing as required by the Planning Act to hear the applicant, Jack and Diane Gerking, and every other person who desires to be heard in favor of or against the application for a minor variance from the zoning bylaw respecting 6263 Millpond Lane. Do any members of the committee have a disclosure of interest concerning this application? Seeing none. If the applicant or agent is listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. We will acknowledge your raised hand and you will be unmuted to explain the application. And my apologies if I got the last name wrong. Mr. Perrin, do we have the applicants online? Mr. Hales, are you acting as agent for the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, please explain the application.
Yes, I am.
Oh, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
We're looking for a minor variance. Yeah, my signal has suddenly gone bad.
That's typical for Zoom meetings.
Yeah, and I also live rurally, so it makes it even more difficult. We're looking for a minor variance on a garage build to the east of the home. The bylaw permits 12 feet. We're looking at 13'9". We're also looking to, the garage will protrude in front of the home approximately 2.6 meters, but due to the angle of the home, it doesn't actually go past the front of the house. It just goes really past the front of the existing garage. The homeowners did their due diligence and they contacted the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority and had them come out prior to us making any type of application. And they approved the location because it's 50 feet and further from the edge of the bank as well of the waterway there. So we're just looking for approval of those minor variances.
Thank you, Mr. Hales. Mrs. Wilson, what
I'm
method
not
of?
sure if you could hear me.
Oh, yes, actually, you came in clear, your whole explanation. So thank you very much for that. Mrs. Wilson, what method of notice and when was notice given to the public of the hearing?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject property on Friday, May the 7th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff on that day and published to the municipal website. Notice was also displayed in the CE Buzz advertisements. Thank you.
Mr. McClure, do you have any comments with regards to the application?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further.
Thank you. Do any of the municipal staff have any comments or questions? I'm seeing none. Mrs. Wilson, have you received any written submissions on the application?
Madam Chair, no correspondence has been received.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions or comments with regards to the application? I'm seeing none. This meeting will now be open to questions from the public. If you are listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. Questions will be taken in a sequential order. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the record. And Mr. Perrin, I'm not seeing any raised hands. We don't have anybody in the waiting room.
No raised hands, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Everybody then has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. Is the committee ready to make a decision? Mrs. Wilson, if you could please take the vote.
Councillor Krebitz,
Yes.
Councillor Fair,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Marks,
Yes.
Councillor Rowe,
Yes.
Mayor Martin,
Yes.
and Councillor Wynne.
Yes.
It's granted.
Thank you. Those wanting to be notified of the committee's decision on any application should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralalgon.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and provide their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This meeting is now adjourned.
And our next meeting, the zoning bylaw amendment meeting for 507 West Edith Cavell Boulevard will be at 6:45.
You good comments for the washrooms down in Port Stanley, the painting? I think it's all done now, I take it. Does anybody know that? It is?
I know it's done on the south side because Carol Gates told me that it looks wonderful, but I don't know about the north side.
They put a clear coat on it today, so they're all wrapped up. So
Yeah. How was the weekend down there, Jeff? Pretty uneventful, or how was it?
I didn't hear anything bad that came out of it. So it was quite busy down there, I understand, throughout most of the weekend, but yeah, pretty uneventful for the most part. So
yeah, the traffic was starting to build prior to the weekend, I know. And then it came back on Saturday. Sunday wasn't as bad, I don't think.
yeah, that's what I had heard. Is it was quite windy and a little cooler on Sunday, I think. They did say Sunday was a little less hectic than Saturday afternoon and Monday for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe not quite as bad or as many people down there as we thought there could be. Maybe that rain early, or I guess late morning, early afternoon on Saturday may have.
That morning, yeah.
So
I never heard anything about Grand Bend, how they made out, if they did keep their beaches closed or if they opened. I don't know what happened up Grand Bend way. Anybody
They
here?
relented, they opened.
Okay. The mayor or the warden was pretty relentless and pretty adamant about keeping them closed, but they did open. Okay.
I think it was just Godrich stuck to their guns.
Hmm. About the splash pad, is that going to be discussed during council? Maybe that should be brought up about the planned opening for the splash pads.
June 4th. June 4th.
June, yeah. I think maybe that should be explained during council though, just so people realize why. Because of the June 2nd timing when we thought the reopening was going to happen.
Paul sent us an email half an hour ago, so that I think the 4th was mentioned, so.
Yeah, I got that as well.
And that's just because of staffing. You know, we didn't bring in our new staff until June 2nd because of the lockdown till then. So they can't get the splash pad open until then.
I think perhaps somebody should bring that up during open session though, the reasoning why it's not open right away. Sally, if you could maybe do that during new business or something.
Sure. Jeff, do you want to mention that or do you want Paul to, or what would you like? He's not here at the moment.
Sure, if you want to bring it up in new business, I'd be happy to deliver the news and why it's not going to be open till the 4th. So.
Okay, I will do that.
And I got my garbage my new garbage pail. Thank you, Jeff.
You're very welcome.
How's the rollout on those doing?
You know what? Considering we're delivering 6,000 of these, we're doing really, really well. There have been a few things that have come up, but all in all, it's the rollout has been done really well. So I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out. So
I don't know if I
So
was
you're
correct.
aware, you know, we are still live and we still do have an audience. So just so you're aware.
I did have a few inquiries about putting the bin, because it says up against the curb. So I'm assuming they don't mean on the street side of the curb, but rather on the other side. That was the only question I had from people.
It was a bit confusing because it did say to put the wheels next to the curb, and yet the picture shows it correctly on the front. So I told them, look at the picture. It, you know, the part with the hook or the bar has to go up to the curb, but not on the street.
My wife hasn't tried the bin out yet, but I think she'll be fine with it.
When do we get to meet your wife?
Hopefully not.
It doesn't really matter because he just said it live streaming on Facebook.
That's right. Hopefully her or her friends are listening.
Yeah.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a public meeting as required by subsection 34, bracket 12 of the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment respecting 507 West Edith Cavell Boulevard. The amendment is required to allow for the construction of a new single detached residential dwelling. Specifically, the applicant is requesting reduction in the side yard setbacks and revisions related to the height provisions. Does any member of council have a disclosure of interest concerning this proposal? Seeing none, what method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for this meeting?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 120 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on Friday, April the 30th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff and placed on the municipal website. Notice was also displayed in the weekly CE Buzz advertisements.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, would you like to run us through the proposed amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just share my screen. So as can be seen on the screen right now is the draft zoning bylaw amendment for 507 West Edith Cavell Boulevard. As can be seen in the image, it's on the north side of West Edith Cavell, just east of Bartholomew Street. The purpose of the application is to demolish the existing residential dwelling on the property and construct a new residential dwelling closer to West Edith Cavell Boulevard, similar to the other lots that have been created to the west of the property. Specifically on the screen now is the proposed elevations at the time, like we're currently through the application to show what's being proposed for the site. As was indicated in the, I guess, the description, the height requirements for the OS3 zone right now and through all the bylaws in the municipality deal with height restriction as stories, so limiting it to 2 stories in height. What's being proposed is a 3-story building. However, there is going to be a height restriction on it in meters that would be consistent with the heights that we've seen in low density developments up on East Road and elsewhere within Port Stanley. The provision would be 11 meters height, and based on how the height is measured through the bylaw, it would be consistent with, again, the zones that have been approved to date in some of the newer areas. So this brings us to the draft amendment itself. Part 1 of the amendment introduces a Schedule A to the bylaw, being a map Part 2BE. Part 2 of the amendment introduces Schedule B to the bylaw, being Schedule 35, which I'll get into some more detail in a bit. And Part 3 of the amendment designates the lands outlined in heavy solid lines on Schedule A as R1-88, so being the site-specific zoning that's going to be placed on the property, as this is map Part 2BE. And this is Schedule 35 as part of the demolition of the current dwelling that's built into the slope. There was a geotechnical report that was prepared in support of the application that defined a toe of the slope. As part of that technical recommendation, there was a 4.5 meter rear yard setback placed on that, a recommendation to be set back from that toe to ensure that there wasn't any sort of buildings or structures that could create instability, but also more for erosion access allowance should there need to be materials or equipment to go in there to ensure repair of that toe. Then part 4 of the amendment introduces a new subsection to the R1 section of the Port Stanley bylaw, being new subsection 9.2.2.88. Provides that the defined area shown on zoning map part 2BE be defined as R1-88. Provides for a front yard setback of 7.5 meters. Provides a side yard setback of 1 meter for the westerly side yard, 2.3 meters for the easterly side yard, a rear yard setback of 4.5 meters from the toe of the slope as shown on that schedule 35. Provides that the height be 11 meters maximum for the main building. And then there's a notwithstanding clause in there to be from the general provisions of the bylaw for height, that the building height shall be measured to the highest point of the dwelling. This is important to note because the 11-meter maximum and the 11-meter height restriction on some of the newer developments could be potentially based on the type of roof that's being provided, be the midpoint between the ridge and the eaves. So the building height itself could actually physically be taller than 11 meters. This is going to ensure that it's locked down to that 11-meter height. And then 6 meters for detached accessory structure or building. There's also some general exceptions to the provisions of the bylaw to address the height and side yard setbacks that's provided through this draft zoning bylaw amendment. And then part 5 of the amendment introduces Schedule C to the bylaw, being zoning map 2, which essentially is the consolidation of all of the amendments that have occurred to zoning map 2 through all the previous amendments, including this amendment, which can be seen here with the provision being over down in this area down here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Have you received any written submissions on the proposal?
Madam Chair, correspondence has been received from Kettle Creek Conservation Authority stating no objections, while stating that the property is located within the modified regulatory flood standard zone of the Lake Erie flood uprush and will require a permit from KCCA prior to any development on the property.
Thank you. We will now be opening the meeting to questions from the public. For those attending who have not already submitted their concerns or comments to the municipality, if you are listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you are called into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. The questions will be taken in a sequential order. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the record. The meeting is now open to the public. Mr. Perrin will let me know if anyone has any questions.
Seeing none, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do any members of council or, again, any members of the public that have any questions? Seeing none from council and hearing none more from the public, everyone has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. If there are no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw on the proposed amendment should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralalgon.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and providing their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This public meeting is now concluded. Any amendment to the bylaw will be considered at a future meeting of council. The next meeting will commence at 7 o'clock. The one concerning Warren Street. It is now 7 o'clock, so I will call this meeting to order. This is a public meeting as required by subsection 34, bracket 12 of the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment respecting 377 Warren Street. The amendment is required to facilitate the development proposal. Specifically, the severed lands that are proposed for the 14-unit townhouse development are to be zoned a site-specific residential zone 2, and the retained lot with the existing residential dwelling will be zoned the general residential zone 1. A future site plan and condominium application process will be required should the zoning and severance be approved. Does any member of council have a disclosure of interest concerning this proposal? Seeing none. What method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for this meeting?
Madam Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 120 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on Friday, April the 30th. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff and placed on the municipal website. Notice was also displayed in the weekly CBuzz advertisements.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, I will ask you now to explain the zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just share my screen. What's on the screen currently is the presentation of the draft zoning bylaw amendment for 377 Warren Street. As can be seen on the screen, is the area of the subject lands, the north side of Warren Street, in between Colburn Street and Carlo. Again, the purpose of the application is to allow for the development of 14 townhouse units in the rear portion of the property. As you can kind of see along here, there is a corresponding severance application that was applied for to essentially sever off a portion of the property where the existing dwelling is. That is my understanding. That application has been appealed. Just to note, as such, the zoning bylaw amendment that we presented today, there may need to be some follow-up back to council on that based on the fact that it has been appealed and what that would mean for the passing or refusal of the bylaw. On the screen here right now, as you can see, is what was proposed through the site plan that was prepared with the application. Again, the location of the proposed severance here for the existing dwelling, and then the remaining lands that would be part of the condominium corporation that would be looking after these 14 townhouse units. There's a location of an easement for hydro or gas easement that goes through the property as well. And some preliminary elevations or drawings of what the proposal would look like. Again, as you can kind of see, due to the floodproofing measures, the rear portion of the building would be elevated over the flood fringe area of the property. This brings me to the amendment itself. Part 1 of the amendment introduces Schedule A to the bylaw, being map part 5Y, with part 2 of the amendment being Schedule B to the bylaw, being Schedule 36. Part 3 of the bylaw designates the lands outlined in heavy solid lines on Schedule A as R1, and then provides that the general provisions of the Port Stanley bylaw will apply to that property. Again, that's the recognizing the existing single detached residential dwelling that currently exists and applying the general R1 provisions to that property that is currently under appeal. Part 4 of the amendment designates the lands and hatch lines on Schedule A as R2-7. And then we'll be going into a bit of the site specifics for that. That is the portion of the property that would be zoned to allow for the townhouse development. And as can be seen here, and I'll be getting into a little bit of the OS 3-20 later, but the lands that are in the OS 3-20 are the lands that have been identified through study as the floodway. No development is permitted within the floodway. No buildings or structures will be permitted other than, I guess, municipal works or conservation works that are required by the municipality and or the conservation authority. But it would allow for passive recreation use for the individuals that are at the townhouses. So again, showing the location of where the proposed severance was with a single attached dwelling, and then the townhouse area is at R2-7. As part of that, and because of the constraints on the site, there is a special schedule that defines the building envelopes that would be permitted in the this R2-7 zone. These were supported through study, being again the flood line here and the geotechnical setback along this area here. The supporting studies that were provided dealt with development within the flood fringe and demonstrated to provincial criteria that the development in these proposed areas would not pose a safety risk for the individuals on the property or off-site. So the flood waters and that through a storm event would be adequately, I guess, stored or on site and not impact the neighboring properties. So that's, again, one of the requirements of development in the flood fringe per municipal policy. This then brings us to part 5 of the amendment, which is the site-specific R2 zone in the Port Stanley bylaw, being the new subsection 9.3.2.7. Provides that on zoning map part 5Y that the defined areas is that R2-7. Provides that the only permitted use being townhouse dwelling and accessory uses. Provides that the only permitted buildings or structures be townhouse dwelling 14 units and accessory buildings or structures. It provides in there that the only location of buildings and structures are within the building area shown on Schedule 36. There are 2 exceptions to that, and that would be a permitted fence along property lines, but outside of the floodway, and as well as light standards. So as part of the site plan that would need to follow this to get it into some of the details, any sort of lighting through light standards there'd be exceptions to that to be located outside of that building area. Minimum lot frontage is that 7.9 meters for that access road going driveway that's going up to the new townhouse development. Just to note as well, it's intended that the residential dwelling that currently exists would be using that same driveway. So we would not have 2 driveways for those 2 uses in that close proximity entering onto Warren Street. The maximum height being 2 stories of the building, and then providing some definitions, as right now the townhouse dwelling isn't defined within the Port Stanley bylaw. So we provided a townhouse dwelling definition consistent with other municipalities in that it's a building containing 3 or more attached dwelling units in a single row, each of which dwelling unit has an independent entrance from the outside and is vertically separated from a abutting dwelling unit. And then there's also a revised height definition where it provides a bit of a difference from the provisions in the bylaw right now, because it will not consider the horizontal plane through Google grade where floodproofing measures are required. Right now, when you're dealing with some of that, right now, because of the slope, the rear portion of the property could be looked at as being three stories as per the definition in the bylaw. This recognizes that just due to site characteristics, it's really a 2-story dwelling. It just happens to have quite a bit of a drop off at the back due to the slope. And then again, providing some exceptions to the general provisions of the R2 zone to allow for what's being applied for today. Part 6 of the amendment then goes back to designating the area and crosshatch lines on Schedule A as OS 3-20. And then provides a new subsection to the OS 3 section of the Port Stanley bylaw, being 8.4.2.20. Again, goes and shows that the defined area on zoning map part 5Y is shown as OS 3-20, provides that the only permitted uses are conservation and drainage purposes and passive recreation use. Provides that the buildings and permitted buildings and structures are only buildings and structures erected by a municipal corporation or conservation authority for those conservation and drainage purpose uses or passive recreational uses. And then the exceptions, again, being to the general provisions of the OS 3 zone, essentially only allowing for those conservation purpose uses. And then part 8 of the amendment introduces a new Schedule C to the bylaw, being zoning map part 5, where again, in anticipation of the eventual consolidation of the Port Stanley bylaw, this map part consolidates and makes all the changes to map part 5 by previous amendments and by this amendment, which can be seen here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Have you received any written submissions on the proposal, Mrs. Wilson?
Madam Chair, correspondence has been received from Kettle Creek Conservation Authority stating no objections and would recommend the following consideration: that the associated area and lands within which fall within the floodway portion of the flood hazard limit, and such lands located within the erosion hazard limit be designated with an applicable zone that identifies the associated hazardous lands and that would prohibit any buildings or structures of any kind. It was noted that a permit from KCCA under Ontario Regulation 18106 will be required prior to any site alterations and or development on the property. Correspondence has also been received collectively from the following residents: Meredith Goodwin and Chris Cooper, 3838 Union Road; Gregory Gelbreath, 363 Warren Street; Mark Hall, 37726 Lake Line; Bart and Ursula Haight, 382 Carlo Road; Bernie Capitano, 369 Warren Street; Paul and Wilma Van Varenberg, 3830 Union Road; and Charlie and Laurie Johnston, 3849 Union Road. The correspondence states concerns with the zoning change, flooding, and natural habitat. Both items of correspondence have been circulated to council and staff.
Thank you. We will now be opening the meeting to questions from the public. For those attending who have not already submitted their concerns or comments to the municipality. If you are listening on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, please click the raise hand icon. And if you have called the meeting into the meeting using a telephone, please dial *9. The questions will be taken in a sequential order. When given the opportunity to speak, please provide your name and address for the record. I'm now opening the meeting to the public, and Mr. Perrin will be controlling letting you in the order you raise your hands or push *9. So the first one we have is Matt Campbell. Matt, if you would like to go ahead and speak.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Can I confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you clearly.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm Matt Campbell. I'm from Zolinka Priamo. We're the planners and agents on behalf of the applicant, Connex Canada, and Jacob Katz, and the owner, Margaret Berry, for this site. We're very excited to be in front of you today, although remotely. I mean, we would certainly prefer to have this in person, but nonetheless, we're very excited to have this come before council for the public meeting. We've been working diligently with staff on this application for over a year, and I wanted to stress that I know that there was quite a bit of social commentary regarding a number of the studies that were done in support of this application. I would like to stress that we have scoped all of these studies with municipal, county, and KCCA staff to their specific specifications. So we're confident that all of those studies justify that this particular development, number one, is not going to create any hazards on other lands and is appropriate for this site.
Sorry, you're cutting in and out a bit, Matt.
Oh,
now.
my apologies. The point that I wanted to make was that we scoped all of these studies long beforehand with staff.
Thank you.
Mr. McClure could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was nothing outstanding in the technical sense. Mr. McClure's presentation was comprehensive. I would just like to add a couple of things for council's consideration. When we look at these lands, this is an interesting piece of property because it's a largely vacant piece with one single detached dwelling on it. It's largely underutilized, but yet it's designated residential in the Central Elgin official plan. There are no natural heritage constraints. There are natural hazard constraints, which I mentioned we are addressing. But these lands are planned for residential uses, and that's what you see before you today. The development itself, 14 townhouse units arranged in a cul-de-sac. Everything is laid out nicely on the site, accessed through a single driveway. As Mr. McClure mentioned, the current U-shaped driveway that is used to access the single detached dwelling, the westerly leg of that driveway is proposed to be removed, thereby reducing the number of accesses onto Warren Street. The setbacks that are proposed in the bylaw, we have consulted with staff and we're agreeable to all of those. The interesting thing just to note about the R2 zone is that the standard regulations of the R2 zone don't actually specify any setbacks or anything like that. So any development in the R2 zone in Central Elgin, it's actually site specific. So there are no general setbacks that we can apply in this case. And that's why Mr. McClure presented that schedule for the building envelopes. We think this is an excellent addition to the housing supply in Port Stanley. We know, we're all very familiar with the real estate market right now. Everything is going a little bit crazy right now in terms of pricing. And we believe that these townhouses will offer housing at a lower price point in the community of Port Stanley. I don't have anything further to add for council's consideration at this time, but just please be aware that we are on the line. We'll be happy to answer any questions that the municipality, council, staff, or the public may have with this application. Like I mentioned, there's a plethora of studies that go along with this. We've looked at this from every single angle and be happy to explain every facet of this proposed development. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Mr. Perrin will let the next person in.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Laura, you're the next one to speak. So if you would like to state your name and address, please, and then speak. So you need to, there, thank you.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Laura Johnston. I'm at 3849 Union Road.
Can you speak just a little louder, Laura? We're just able to hear you and that's all.
Sorry, is this better?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Laura Johnston. I'm at 3849 Union Road. And I was just wondering, I was hoping to hear the councilors or your guys' thoughts on our letter that we submitted. And if you
Not hearing you at the moment.
My mistake.
Sorry, just a minute.
can you, sorry, did you hear me or?
No, we didn't. We now are able to hear you. I'm sorry. We had a technical glitch here. Go ahead.
No problem. I was just hoping to hear your guys' thoughts on the letter we submitted.
Okay, we're going to be going to council in just a moment to speak. So what we do is we try to let all the public have their questions, et cetera, first. You, council members, do you wish to speak now concerning the letter that was sent in, or would you rather wait to hear all the questions first?
You can wait.
Okay. It's up to you. Okay, so we'll go on, Laura. We will respond to that in a few moments. We'll just hear if there's anyone else that has questions, and then we will respond to the letter. Mr. Perrin, do we have others? We have capital engineer. State your name and address, please, and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Meredith Goodwin, and I'm with Chris Cooper, and we live at 3838 Union Road. And my question is, we've heard from the developer, and of course the developer would want this zoning change. The developer is of course going to sell why they want the zoning change. But this question is not about the 14 houses that they are proposing. My question is about the zoning, and why would we want to change from a R1 to an R2 when there is no R2 in this area?
Mr. McClure, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as it was, I guess, pointed out already through by Mr. Campbell, the lands are designated for residential use within the municipality's official plan. That designation does contemplate a full range of uses subject to certain criteria being met as per the Planning Act and in a landowner's ability or right to do so. There's an application process that an individual can go forward with to try to justify a land use planning proposal on property subject to meeting the official plan criteria. As has been indicated through Matt Campbell, the applicant has provided a number of studies that would meet the tests of the municipality's official plan and would conform to those policies.
Does that answer your question?
Not really, because if I look at the zoning plan, I don't actually see it as R1. So I only see I don't see the R1 on the plan. So I'm not quite sure how that was planned as residential.
So if I may, within the county, within the municipality of Central Elgin's official plan, the lands are designated for residential use. Just to speak to, I guess I have read the letter that was submitted, and some of the comments and questions that were raised through that letter spoke to a couple of different things. The lands, as I indicated, the lands are designated for residential use within the official plan, and the official plan within the residential designation contemplates everything from single detached, like single detached houses, semi-detached houses, all the way up to apartments. But in order to allow for those certain developments, the certain policies within the official plan need to be met. What the applicant has gone forward with is to change the zoning that was on the property, which was the C1 zone and OS3 zone, that dealt with some historical uses on the property. They've gone forward with the application process to try to justify the proposed development. So that's what they're going forward with right now, is to look at the official plan designation being residential and now going forward with a zoning bylaw amendment change to support their proposed townhouse development.
Yeah, so I would have, I don't think I have any concerns with it staying R1 or there being a house there. But I definitely think that changing this is working towards a developer that got a cheap property, and we're just working, it seems like we're working in favor with them. And so that's all the comments that I have to make today, but we've submitted our letter, so thank you.
Thank you. The next person, Mr. Perrin. Okay, Mark. Mark, you've come up. If you would state your name and address, please, and then ask your question.
Hi there. Thanks very much. It's Mark Hall with 37726 Lake Line. Obviously, per the letter, there's quite a few environmental concerns, monarch butterflies, things of that nature, no pun intended. But one of the other concerns is it just doesn't seem consistent. The word, I know Matt Campbell had mentioned floodplain or floodway, erosion zones, things like that. And I wonder, when we remove these types of areas from our watershed, these act as sponges to remove major contaminants, urban, like from roadways, like urban runoff. Changing the permeability of the surface really causes those pollutants to go directly into the creek. Obviously, with tourism season heating up now, these types of things along the creek are so critical to keep the creek as clean as we can and the water outflows going into the lake as clean as they can. They protect the fisheries, tourism that's worth millions of dollars, and but that's kind of taking a financial statement rather than the environmental statement, which I think unfortunately gets pushed to the roadside. Like, how much are our fisheries worth? How much is the tourists that come in worth economically? Unfortunately, we have to boil it down to a dollar figure, when really the argument should be, hey, let's not remove these types of sponges from the waterway areas. The other thing that came to mind was they mentioned in the plan that there were some contaminants that were removed. I was a little bit disappointed to see there was a lot of what I felt was glossing over of these types of things. Like, well, what happens if now we're removing a lot of sponge area that soak up these types of contaminants? But what types of studies were done on other parts of the properties? It doesn't seem, unfortunately, as much as I'd like the property owner to be able to make some extra income that way, like, it just doesn't seem like it's been planned out effectively, given that this is such a limited green space area left in within village limits, right? So it's concerning. I just wonder, does anybody else have any concerns one last final point or question, I suppose, for maybe for Matt Campbell. Matt, thanks for your time and trying to explain some of your points of why you guys want to have this rezoned. But the one question is, are you guys like, have you ever talked about like, how do you know for sure that it's not going to flood and cause any damage to those piers? I've seen some pretty crazy floods and ice jams. I mean, even go down the road to Port Bruce, that some of the damage there. And I mean, are you guys for sure certain you can say in writing 100% that the residents or anybody who buys these condos are going to be able to get insurance on them, or will be on the hook as like taxpayers for the county should damage occur? And like, how do you know where that flood or erosion limit stops? I mean, can you provide some surety to council that residents aren't going to be on the hook for any damages that might occur from an insurance standpoint if they're not insurable? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to let Kevin speak first because he can certainly tell you about the zoning, like the flooding areas and how that would work and with the insurance. So I'll let Kevin speak first, and then I'll let Matt Campbell answer the other questions.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Hall. As has been, I guess, referenced by Matt Campbell, there were a number of technical studies that were required to deal with this property. The one that was specifically to the flooding and impacts, and again, them doing flood modeling forecast was Eco Recovery Solutions, Inc. I guess they're a well-known and respected firm that Kettle Creek Conservation Authority has worked with it in the past, and I guess has accepted their recommendations before. Same thing with EXP Services Inc. That dealt with the erosion and geotechnical to deal with those aspects of the development. I think what should be noted is that while I guess from a technical standpoint, they have met all the criteria, staff did recognize or recommend certain changes be done throughout the process for siting of buildings and that to potentially alleviate some of those concerns. So it is something that was brought up through the process. But ultimately, the applicant and their staff decided to go forward with what's being presented today. As was indicated in the staff report, while it technically does meet the official plan policies that for the municipality. Yes, there were certain things that would, or I guess, were suggested to be revised as a means to change up the development, but the supporting material that was provided provided enough justification for what was proposed today.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, could you respond? Do you have any response to what was asked by Mark Bell Hall? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mark Hall, I understood the questions to be a comment on flooding, insurance, and environmental contaminants and how these lands relate to all three of those. So I'll start with the environmental contaminants first. As Mr. McClure mentioned, there was a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment prepared for this site, which, if you're familiar with that process, there's a number of steps that are undertaken to evaluate a site for any sort of environmental criteria. And on this site, it was determined that the previous use of the site warranted on-site inspection through boreholes, and that's what was done. And all of those boreholes came back clean except for one, which was determined to be a likely burn pit. So someone burning garbage or something like that on the site. So that area, it was about 10 cubic meters or so, was removed. That was done several months ago. And we're in the process of filing what's called a record of site condition with the Ministry of Environment right now. To the comment about how these lands soak up contaminants, I think maybe what you're referring to is the ability of a grassed area or porous material to absorb stormwater, things of that nature. What it can provide to you is that the servicing and grading plan for this site has been carefully prepared that incorporates the necessary servicing criteria to the municipality's specifications. And specifically what that means is all the hard surface area on this site will be drained to a point and will have to go through what's called a quality control system. And that would go through what's called an oil grit separator to filter out contaminants such as oil, sediment, things of that nature before that runoff is then discharged into Kettle Creek. So to hopefully answer your question, based on the studies that we have and the servicing drawings that we have already prepared, there would be no impact to the environmental qualities of this site. To your question about flooding, as Mr. McClure mentioned, we did provide a very technical and very comprehensive hydraulic analysis, which evaluated the flood levels on Kettle Creek. And this is an interesting site because it uses a two-zone flood model or two-zone flood concept. And the first zone being a floodway, that's the area that we don't build anything in because it would get flooded frequently enough. And that's once every 100 years that we can't put any structures there. The zone above that, that's called the flood fringe. And that's where we're proposing development that is outside of the flood event. So if you can refer to the building elevations that we provided, the rear of the buildings are actually up on piles that would allow floodwaters during that major event. And that's perhaps Lloyd or Kevin could correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that's the Hurricane Hazel event. That would be the 1 to 250. And in a catastrophic event, floodwaters would flow right underneath of the piles. So that report that we had, and I do want to stress that Ecosystem Recoveries was in quite a bit of consultation with KCCA. There was a lot of back and forth to get that report to the level that KCCA was going to require. And KCCA was satisfied with that. So we don't have any concerns with flooding. And that report does confirm that there wouldn't be any adverse impacts on upstream or downstream lands. That's really the key, the second key component, is that there's no risk to human health and safety on site, and there's no increase in risk off site. And Mark, to your third point regarding insurance, that's beyond my expertise. I can't really comment on that. I think we know anecdotally there's some information that would suggest that it may be difficult to get insurance in a flood zone. But I'm not the expert that really should be commenting on that, and I can't really answer your question one way or the other. To the second question regarding insurance and whether the municipality would be on the hook for any sort of damage that would be caused, again, I can't answer that, and I would defer that to municipal staff. My initial thought would be, I don't see how that the municipality would be on the hook for any sort of damages to the site. It's private investment, and any damages would be borne by the landowner or the condominium corporation. If there's anything else that I can add, just let me know. Thank you.
And I can't, Mr. Chipway just stepped out for the moment. He was coughing. So I can come back to the concept of whether the municipality would be responsible for any damage when Mr. Chipway returns. Well, here he comes back. We'll give him a chance to speak if he's able to. They were asking about the insurance. Would the municipality be responsible if there was any damage?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think anytime the municipality is associated with any sort of insurance claim, there's always a possibility of risk, but I don't know that that's a planning principle under the Planning Act to be considered at this time. The municipality can always be sued and named as a defendant in any claim.
Thank you. Do we have another person who'd like to ask a question? Shane Delaney, would you go ahead and state your name and address, please? You need to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, Shane Delaney, 355 Warren Street in Port Stanley. My concerns are about the flood zone, like the last gentleman was just talking about. I've been here since 2010. My stepmom owned the house before me, and I've got actual pictures back in 2009 when the river jammed up at the mouth to Lake Erie. My bank, my top of my property sits about 30 feet above the river. The trailer park across from me, which I don't believe anybody should be in there, there's an arrow stream and the trailer's still there. He was 7 feet under water that year. That's the year the river almost went over the curb towards Foodland. When it let go, and this is containing to the piles they say they want to put in there. When the mouth let go, or the river, the mouth of the river let go out into Lake Erie, that water came rushing around the bends so fast, I lost over 4 feet of the backyard. What happens when these pieces of ice that are 3.5 feet thick hit those piles that are holding up the houses? Mark Berry's property that year had 6 feet of water up on top, like above the 4-foot retaining wall that's down there. She had about 6 feet of water and ice up in that backyard. I'm 30 feet high. That's only 4 feet high. I could almost reach over my bank and touch the ice that was going down that river. I just want to know how structural those piles that are going to be holding up the back of those houses are going to be if a big iceberg hits it. If we should have another mouth jam like we did that year.
Okay, I'm going to ask Mr. Campbell if he would respond to that, or Mr. McClure, whichever. Mr. McClure, go ahead.
If I may, that's definitely something that staff can follow up with KCCA following this meeting. But as has been indicated throughout the process and discussions with KCCA, what's being proposed for floodproofing measures would meet provincial guidelines and standards. Whether or not that contemplates the specific situation that Mr. Delaney is referring to, or whether or not there would need to be some additional measures taken. That's something that we could definitely follow up with KCCA just with respect to the structural integrity of the piers. Again, though, with respect to the heights and the how the things are being shown in the elevations, that was done with specific modeling by Ecosystems Recovery Solutions Inc. Just to deal with the worst case scenario and whether or not there was safe access egress from the property for pedestrians and emergency vehicles. It was reviewed by Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, and as it's been indicated, it met all the provincial criteria. So again, with respect to the issues or concerns with respect to structural stability in ice jams, again, I can definitely follow up with Kettle Creek after this and report back to council.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. I appreciate that.
Okay. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yes, go ahead, Shane.
On the Facebook Port Stanley page where you posted the sign on Mark Berry's front lawn.
Yes.
I posted those two pictures if those gentlemen would like to see the flood back in 2009. I posted the pictures up there for them if they want to take a look at them.
Yes, and I think they came in the letter, I believe, that we received as well.
Oh, that must have been from somebody else because I didn't write a letter.
Okay, you weren't in that, there are two pictures of ice jams
Yeah.
and flooding.
Right. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delaney.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Is there another person, Mr. Perrin? Greg Galbraith? State your address, please. And if you're not Greg Galbraith, your name, please. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Greg Galbraith, 363 Warren Street, Port Stanley.
Go ahead.
I just want to follow up with what Shane was saying. I'm not too concerned about how the new condos hold up, but I am concerned about what an ice jam and a lot of water going around that corner would do to my own property as far as accelerating the erosion. And one question I would be asking is the new developer putting a seawall around the property, or how are they going to deal with the waterfront? My biggest concern is also is, you know, are the ice jams factored into this? Because the ice jams totally change. It's a game changer as far as water levels go. And when they do happen, even a normal run on the river is very damaging to our earth banks on the north side of the river here. Ice jams are absolutely devastating. So I am interested in what they're doing for a seawall, and if that's going to change the course of the river and what happens to my property, you know, am I going to get a seawall out of this as well? There's a lot of, you know, trees, and a lot of people are interested in the natural beauty of the lot. We're getting sort of hit with another high density project. We already have a campground in the area, which is very high density now. And so by putting 14 condos on the property, that's just adding, you know, a huge amount of people in our area that, you know, we've just been doubled up across the river in the last year. The third thing that I would also like the planning process to take into consideration is sort of the passive uses on the floodplain. Things like light pollution, light standards, and, you know, how many do we need? Do they need to be on all night? You know, a lot of the people live here, we like the sort of natural country lifestyle that we have. We can look out at the sky at night and see the stars. And that was kind of why we came to Port Stanley, to retire and enjoy our life. And, you know, instead of seeing sort of less people and having a quiet lifestyle, Port Stanley is exploding and becoming a very high density place. And, you know, instead of sleeping in and listening to the birds, we're going to be hearing hammers and construction and watching our waterfronts deteriorate. As this development continues, there's more boats in the river. And now I'm noticing a lot more wake off these craft. I'm not sure who we talked to get no wake signs up and down the creek, but that's absolutely a must, because that also adds to the erosion. Those were the three things I wanted to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. And as to the erosion from the boat wakes, et cetera, that isn't part of tonight's, obviously, but you certainly are welcome to contact us about that in the future. Matt, would you like to speak to Mr. Galbraith's concerns with the retaining wall or whatever?
Through you, Madam Mayor, hopefully you can hear me now. There's a little bit of a delay there. The question was, are we doing a...
We've lost you again. Now you're back.
Madam Mayor, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm only in St. Thomas. I'm not that far away. It shouldn't be this glitchy. To the question about the seawall, No, we're not proposing a new seawall at this time. That was not, that wasn't previously brought up with staff. I didn't, and that was not a concern. If staff express concern with the seawall that's there now, I'm sure that's something that we could look at. In terms of erosion, again, I'm going to rely on the report that we had prepared that speaks to water levels and the velocity of the creek as well. That concludes that there's really isn't going to be any material impact one way or the other on the creek about that. I understand there's a lot of related things that we're talking about, you know, the ice flows, ice jams, boats that aren't necessarily related to what we're talking about here. We're certainly mindful of those, but again, I'm just going to rely on the report that we have that satisfied KCCA.
Thank you. And just to keep the meeting going, I'm going to ask, this is not going to be considered tonight. We're just hearing the public's concerns, and staff will be looking into the concerns that are expressed. And we have Mario Garcia. If you would state where you live, please, your address, and go ahead.
Yes, my name is Mario Garcia, the principal at Connex Canada, and I want to thank you all for having me and have our company. We have seen the condition of the existing wall and the water is in, let's say that it's in good condition. There are some little spots that needs to be fixed, and we are thinking of fixing those parts of the seawall.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. That's my comment for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Perrin, is there someone else? Mark has come back. Go ahead, Mark.
Hi there. Thanks very much. Just a couple quick follow-up things. I think it's good feedback, and it certainly changes things. You know, from what looks really nice on paper. You know, a question that came to mind was, is it conceivable or reasonable to think that should, you know, another like this, the ecological environmental survey was done by a third-party commercial consultant, is it reasonable to think that if another such commercial consultant was hired on behalf of Kettle Creek Conservation Authority or otherwise, could they come to a different conclusion? In fact, support what, you know, some of the residents who have lived here for years have seen insofar as that flooding? Is it conceivable that that report, that new commercial report, could actually say this is a significant threat? It risks not only property damage, but people's lives even. You know what I mean? Like like the ice coming around that, the power of ice. We've seen so many cases, and even there's flooding up now in other parts of Canada that were built on floodplains. I mean, looking at the report, justification report that was posted online, one of the claims was said that, you know, oh, it just didn't make a business case or even to conflict with those. Like what would be so powerful that it would actually override a written statement for not just, you know, your planning department, but really planning departments all over the world that say don't build in floodplains. It's bad things happen when you build in floodplains. Again, I'm taking the environmental factor out, but you know, I appreciate Mr. Campbell's, you know, reply about that potential filtration system to capture road runoff. You know, are they willing to provide information that says this filter system is as effective as removing, you know, significant amount of land that, you know, naturally has been sponging up road runoff for years? Is that filter truly as effective? I've never seen a system that would work to remove the types of contaminants that will end up in the creek. So I'd be curious if there was any way that council could verify that filtration system will indeed replace the benefits of, you know, current OS3 zoned land that currently does this type of you know, ecological benefit for Port Stanley, but really everybody who visits us and the fisheries as well. And then I suppose it begs the question as well, just, you know, rezoning an OS3 land that's zoned OS3, it begs the question, well, can anybody do this then? Like, you know, what if, you know, everybody else in the area wanted to rezone the properties as well. Like that sets a dangerous precedent. I mean, there's obviously certain land that's suitable, and the stated planning objectives by, I believe, Central Oregon State, it's not desirable to build in a floodplain. So I just, unless someone can provide some surety in writing, like, you know, that's backed by financial means that says, hey, this is not going to damage the environment. The filter is going to work the same. And if it doesn't, we'll pay for the types of damages that might occur. Like, that's just more surety, you know, rather than just, you know, we hired one commercial consultant who supports our desires to build on this green space that's currently zoned OS3. You know, would it be worthwhile getting, you know, 50 other, you know, I'm sure out of 50 consultants, you know, X number are going to say this is going to cause horrible damage to the environment and potential risk to the buildings and other property. And the other ones will say, it depends on the perspective and the bias involved. So I just be looking for a little more surety before that all these environmental and other concerns are factored in appropriately. Thanks for your time.
Mr. McClure, go ahead.
Thank you. I can speak to the development within the floodplain. I'm not too sure that it seems that the two-part question. One, I'm not too sure if Lloyd would be, well, he would be better suited than myself to speak to it with respect to that that filtration system that Mark was speaking to. But I guess the import Stanley and typically through the province, yes, it is the preference to have development outside of floodplain or flood prone areas. I guess a bit of an issue that arises is that in certain areas where there is already development, there's what's been referred to as that two-zone concept. Port Stanley is the only area within the municipality of Central Elgin that has the two-zone floodplain concept, which essentially it notes that through you know, scientific technical means, there's a defined floodway where no development is permitted, but subject to certain floodproofing standards, again by the province being met, that development can be permitted in the flood fringe. Subject to it meeting a number of criteria. The Ecosystems Recovery Solutions Inc. Company has worked extensively with Kettle Creek Conservation Authority in the past with respect to development in that flood fringe and providing technical expertise on those matters. Again, the findings of that report and study were reviewed by Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, you know, against their own lookup tables in that as well, and they were satisfied that it met the provincial criteria to have development in the flood that flood fringe. So I guess with respect to that, there are policies within the Central Elgin official plan that allows for development in the flood fringe, subject to meeting those floodproofing standards. The reports were completed by a reputable source and vetted through Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, who accepted the findings of those reports. So again, from a floodproofing, floodplain development perspective, that does conform to the policies. But I know that through discussions with the applicant, there were going to need to be certain things done on the property for site grading and drainage and dealing with the quality of that material going into or outletting into the creek. So I'm not too sure what that is typically found in the filter system, and whether or not Lloyd, Mr. Perrin can speak to that. But yeah, just with respect to the flood development in the floodplain, that has met the provincial criteria.
Mr. Perrin, can you speak to the drainage?
To you, Madam Mayor, there has been discussion that there will be required quality control from the effluent leaving the site. The previous spokesperson there raised concerns about the land filtering out runoff from the roadways, I believe. I can advise that Warren Street has curb and gutter on it as a storm sewer system. So currently the runoff from Warren Street does not go through this property. That being said, once redevelopment happens or is proposed, then the municipality will require quality control from a site such as this. We will not be requiring quantity control because it is immediately adjacent to Kettle Creek. So when the development is immediately adjacent to the receiving course, then we do not require quantity control. With respect to having a second opinion, I can advise that there are certain situations where the municipal staff or conservation staff, we receive a report from a consultant and we have questions about it and we have concerns about the report, and we will ask for a peer review. In this circumstance, in this application, we don't have that situation.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that wishes to ask a question, Mr. Perrin?
Seeing none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, there was the beginning, at the very beginning, the woman asked what we thought of the letter, and I think a lot of the information in the letter has been covered through some of these questions, but I didn't know if I'm going to come here in just a moment to council members and their chance to make comments. I was intrigued with the map from Kettle Creek with the flood hazard zone and the engineered floodway. That was an interesting map that they sent in with that. And I mean, it's clearly evident that this creek may eventually be an oxbow because it's certainly got all the makings of one where it's situated. But that wouldn't affect this development. That would affect the campground, et cetera, that's in Southold. Okay, I'm going to ask then, does anyone else, anyone on council, would you like to ask questions? And do you have comments on the letter that you received? Councillor Wynn, then Councillor Kravitz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, we have a similar development, townhome development to the south on the channel. How does this development differ from that one in planning, in its planning for development? Did they go through similar issues? Is there even anybody around who could speak to it from when it was developed? But seeming to be a similar type of development, were the same issues apparent at the beginning of that development as we are now hearing tonight? If anybody can speak to that, please.
Mr. Perrin, were you around when that condominium across from the school was done? Was that prior to you?
I've been here a long time, but not quite that long. I can advise a couple things. Some of the provincial regulation has changed since that was put in. So for example, stormwater management criteria is considerably different from when that condominium was constructed. I don't believe that there's any type of stormwater quality or quantity control from that site. So whatever is a pipe system, it goes directly to Kettle Creek without any quality or quantity control. With respect to the hydrological studies that were done, I can't speak to whether or not there were. I would only be guessing.
Thank you. Mr. Kravitz, Councillor Kravitz.
Just a couple comments. The current property is zoned OS3 with industrial zone 1, C1, and residential zone R1. That was just I was just blown away when I read that. I have no idea what that means in common English, but we're changing it to, or proposing to change it to R2. In doing this, it seems the intensification of this property is like putting the cart before the horse. It seems like the zoning to do a condominium instead of a housing development, is making this so it's something that the intensification is allowed. I don't think this area was originally zoned in our official plan. And if somebody could comment that to me, the area that in question, I don't believe it was zoned as a growth area or a potential growth area. And it looks like we're changing the zoning or proposing to change the zoning to accommodate that growth. That's the first question I have. If somebody can make that a bit clearer for me.
Mr. McClure?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through to Councillor Krevitz. It is within the designated growth boundary for the Village of Port Stanley, which I mentioned earlier on, does contemplate the full range of housing options. As was provided earlier by Mr. Campbell, the R2 zone in the Village of Port Stanley bylaw is kind of a generic, more medium density or higher density zone that's used for developments that aren't either single detached or semi-detached developments within the Port Stanley area. That was again typical of what has been approved up on East Road, where those townhouse or cluster home blocks were proposed through that plan of subdivision. So it is consistent with us looking at the developments for more infill intensification to fit within that R2 zone, because again, it doesn't really allow for or have a whole lot of general standards. It really is looked at a case-by-case basis. And with respect to how it's currently zoned, I believe that has to do with a lot of historical uses on the property and how the lot used to be configured. In that, I believe at one point there may have been either some small mechanic shop or something in there for dealing with small motor repairs, and I guess maybe some boat docks on there as well. Just as a reference, the OS2 zone, so the OS3 zone that's on the property is consistent with the zones that we normally find along the beach. It really only allows for existing residential development, farm use, summer cottages. It's really a dated zone, and is something that we've been slowly kind of transitioning away to more of the residential zone as the area itself we're not seeing summer cottages anymore. It's difficult to I guess regulate particular land use through different periods of the year. It's a residential use. So it's reflecting the historical nature of the property, and what this would be doing would be changing the zone to reflect now what the existing situation would be with that residential dwelling that's currently on the property, and then allowing for more infill intensification behind.
Thank you. Any other members of council have any questions? I'm sorry, go ahead, Councillor Kravitz, and then Councillor Fair.
Yeah, my other question was in regards to the flood fringe. The letter that was sent out, it showed the flood fringe, and the entire developed area is proposed within the flood fringe area. And according to the provincial policy, modified foundations are allowed if they're dry-based modifications to the foundation. The plans that are shows half of the building being the columns, and the other half, it looks like a block foundation. So it appears that half of the building is being built in the flood fringe area and not being properly modified. I don't know, perhaps Matt can comment on that, because it is allowed, and the only way that you can supersede that is going directly to the Ministry of Natural Resources and have them supersede the design of the house. I was just wondering, your design of the house, it doesn't seem to be all flood-proof, dry flood-proof within the flood fringe area. Go ahead.
Mac, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was on there. Great. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Kravitz. The building elevations that we have, they show the rear portion that's on piles. And if you cross-reference the elevations versus the delineation between the floodway and the flood fringe, you'll see that the building is well, first of all, the building is outside of the floodway. That's that area that Mr. McClure denoted. That is to the north, northwest, and west of the development. That's a no build. There's nothing going on there. In terms of the flood fringe, there are the criteria that we're being required to develop here is, and we talk about flood proofing. So KCCA is requiring that the finished floor elevation and any openings to the buildings, like doors, windows, those types of things, be above a certain elevation. And that's not just an elevation above the ground, but an absolute elevation. I don't recall specifically what it is off the top of my head, but that is why the building is up on piles, to maintain that floor elevation above that regulatory flood elevation. The second part as to why the building is up on piles is to allow that high volume or that 1 to 250 year event. So those floodwaters can go underneath the building. And there was some commentary earlier regarding the structural integrity of those piles, and I have no doubt that those will be designed and built to whatever criteria that the municipality requires. So I think to answer your question, the building itself, it's in the flood fringe. We are adhering to the provincial guidelines and the KCCA policies for that type of development. And to your point, we're not about to get into a discussion with the Ministry of Environment about this. That's not a can of worms that we want to open up here. So we're abiding by everything that KCCA has to tell us.
Finish it up then.
And just one other comment, Matt. The current flood is roughly 175 meters above sea level. And there's discussion right now about the flood level being raised a half a meter to a meter. Has that been taken into consideration with the build of this property if the flood level, that 100-year level is raised?
Through
just comment on that briefly.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. I have heard discussions about a change in the regulatory flood level. Although what I've heard, because we're working on another site in Port Stanley, that's the shoreline hazard. I understand that there's a study that's forthcoming with the municipality that's addressing the actual shoreline. That's the flood uprush. That's more along the main beach. I have not heard specifically about a change to the flood elevation as it pertains to Kettle Creek. What I can advise, though, is that when we were preparing the study that you should have a copy of, there was a discrepancy between the KCCA model, the actual computer model that did the flood modeling, versus what was on file. And our consultants, Ecosystems Recovery, worked with KCCA to reconcile those computer models to the satisfaction of KCCA. So to your point, I haven't heard anything about an increase in flood elevations. I would think that if that was a real and material potential to this site, we would have taken that into account and KCCA would have advised us. To be honest, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Okay, and just one last comment, and then I'll, the person that phoned in earlier about the flooding, I too have seen that entire area underwater, so make those columns strong. Thank you.
Councillor Fair. And then Councillor Rowe.
Okay, I realize that they can't control the ice flow and so on in the creek. My question's in relation to Mr. McClure mentioned that the division of the front property is being under appeal now, and he mentioned that would affect this, could affect this program or this bylaw. So I'm just wondering, are we moving ahead too quickly with the townhouse project, or should we be waiting and see how the results of the appeal from the severance of the front property before we do much with this bylaw?
Councillor Fair, it won't be coming back to council till that other is settled anyway. because we cannot make any decisions until that severance is.
Okay, so it
deemed-
is
Yeah.
effectively being put on hold until that's determined.
Yeah, that certainly would be my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Rowe, I'm sorry, Councillor, or Mr. McClure, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to follow up on that question by Councillor Fair. I believe we would be, well, as a result of some of the questions that have been raised and some follow-up, I believe that staff will be bringing a report in advance of a council decision. And as part of that report, there would be, I think, some discussion as to whether or not next steps of again, refusal, indecision, acceptance of the application, and given that the severance is under appeal. So I think there would be a bit of feedback on that as well, just to kind of address the fact that there is a portion of this application that is currently under appeal, and the zoning reflects that I guess boundary lines that wouldn't exist if that appeal is refused.
Thank you. So we are going to get a report back to council before we have to make any decisions at all. Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I hope this is quick, given the length of time we've been doing this for now. Just about the quantity, and it's R1 and R2. I understand the differences there. R1 is the neighboring homes. Why, I'm curious, were townhomes the decision as opposed to homes? Because there's 14 townhouses in there, and every time I drive by it, it just looks like it would be extremely tight for that number of townhomes and for the access to and from those units. I'm just not convinced that there's enough of that, but I have to believe that they've also done the due diligence there. Anyway, so other than profit reasons, why does it have to be R2 and not R1?
Mr. Campbell, would you like to respond to why you chose to do it that way?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just so I understand the question correctly, why an R2 zone instead of an R1? Well, the simple answer is because the R2 zone is the zone that permits townhouses. If the broader question is, why are we proposing townhouses? Well, the answer to that question is because that's a form of development that this particular developer would like to move forward with. The supporting studies determined that townhouses are an appropriate form of development on this site. It's not too intense. It's not too low density, making an effective use of land, given the environment that we are operating under in these days. And we feel it's an appropriate form of housing.
You had mentioned earlier about it being more affordable. Is that part of the consideration or not?
Madam Mayor, when we use the term affordable, I want to be clear as to what we're actually talking about, because the term affordable housing gets thrown around. And in the planning world, when we use the term affordable housing, that is generally meant to be housing that is provided at less than market rent, which is some sort of subsidized housing or something of that nature. That is not what we are talking about here today. What we are talking about is a form of housing that by its nature is a less costly form of housing. For example, if we were to develop this piece of property for several single detached homes, each one of those homes would be priced much higher than a single townhouse unit. That's what I'm referring to as in terms of that this housing is more affordable than a lower density form of housing.
Thank you. That was my understanding. I just wanted clarification. Does any other member of council have anything else to ask? If not, everyone has been given a fair opportunity to be heard. If there are no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw on the proposed amendment should email Diane Wilson at dwilson@centralalgon.org, indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and providing their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Diane Wilson at 519-631-4860, extension 286, and provide the same information. This public meeting is now concluded. Any amendment to the bylaw will be considered at a future meeting of council. Thank you. So council, you need to go off and Zoom, come in the regular council meeting Zoom invitation, please.